Welcome to the Dragon's Library, your source for games, movies, shows, and more.
Hello everybody, welcome back to the Dragon's Library. So today we have a bit of a surprise. I'm gonna level with you guys. I kind of missed this upload, in a sense. See, I had some other stuff planned that's going to eventually go out. I'm listening to the Wheel of Time right now. I'm going to be watching the show once that's done, so you'll have those double reviews, like I like to do. Because what I really like to do, and this is just a little reference for anybody who hasn't been around that long, when I see an adaptation of a book series, one of my favorite things to do is read the book before the series comes out, or before the movie comes out. I did it with Dune. That's my most recent example anyway, and the main one on the show. And that's because I like to have context when watching something. So if I just watched a movie, if I just went ahead and watched Wheel of Time, and reviewed it, I wouldn't have the context of the actual series. Now, that doesn't mean I'm going to read the entire Wheel of Time series. There are 8 books. I'm not sure I'll even have time to review that. I might review one on off over the next year or so if this keeps going. But I like to have at least the initial context of the series, because usually the first season of a show is only going to cover maybe the first book or two. So that's the update on that. The Wheel of Time is going to get done. If any of you are wondering, I do plan on reviewing that series. It looks really good. I've heard good things. But as a result, I fell behind on listening to the Wheel of Time, and I still have 15 hours left on it, and I don't want to stay up all night listening to it right now. So, since I still want to get this episode released and get ready to release a few days early now because I want to get on this new schedule, I had to find something new to review. And then I remembered, well, I am a little lower on book reviews than I'd like. Video games take a bit longer to review, so I can't just pull one of those. So I was looking for something to review. And I know this is rambling, it's going on, but point is, I decided to review something I'd already kind of set up. For those of you who haven't been here that long, or just haven't watched through my entire playlist yet, I released a special video a few months ago at this point, called The Reference Section. The first video of it was about an old multimedia franchise from Lego called Bionicle. And the reason I did is because I really want to talk about this very special book in the series called Time Trap. It's one of the only books that is genuinely really, really good writing. And as a result, I really wanted to talk about it. So I did. But I also created that because I wanted to review other things. I wanted to try and go back and do a fun, hey, it's kind of bad, but I enjoy this movie anyway, review of Mask of Light, and do some things in that vein. So, since it's been sitting around for over a month now, and I haven't used it in a while, I'm thinking, I need to get some use out of that video. So, that's what we're doing today. I know, I rambled for 3 minutes, but it all came together. So, today we're going to be reviewing the Ignika saga from Bionicle. For those of you who do not know what I am talking about, here's your instruction. I have a video that is going to, sorry, not a video, and I have a link to the podcast. If you're on YouTube, it will be a link to the YouTube video. If you're on our podcast site, either Podpage or any of the places our podcast is on, from Spotify, iTunes, all those places, it will be in the description. You can click on the link and just listen to it. It has sources in the description of both the video and the podcast where you can find more information about this franchise. I would highly advise you at least have a familiarity with this before you continue. It's not that long. It's 20 minutes. Hey, you're putting this on the background anyway to do while you do other stuff. Might as well enjoy it. You don't need it. I'll do some explaining, but it'll give you a basic context. And context is why that video exists. So check out the reference section. Alright, now that I've explained why we're doing this out of nowhere and told you where you can find more information about this subject, let's get on to the Ignika Trilogy. Now, Ignika is how I prefer to call it, but it's also widely and more commonly called Ignition. This is one of the, technically 4, maybe 5 eras of Bionicle. For those of you who don't know, Bionicle is a property by Lego. It was the first attempt they made at creating a multimedia property. So Chima and Ninjago and all that stuff you've been seeing on toy shelves, and how they have books and toys and shows and all that nonsense. Yeah, all of that originated in Bionicle. Lego got tired of licensing out things to other companies, so they decided to make their own franchise and, give it lore. And the lore kind of ballooned into a way bigger than it had any right to be, and I got really taken into it as a child. So the first series was about the Toamata fighting Makuta and winning. They retake this old city. Then the second one is a flashback prequel era to, the old elders when they used to be the heroes. And then the Ignition is the new generation takes over. Basically, the Bionicle universe is ruled by the great spirit Matanui, who's basically their version of God. Although, at this point, we already had hints that he had been created by and maintained by others called the Great Being, so, the God above gods. Of course this gets complicated. And he was put to sleep by Makuta during his coup. The Toa woke him up, and, things were supposed to be good now. They killed Makuta, apparently. Hint, hint. And, everything was supposed to be on top. But, no. No, that's not how that works. Makuta planned for this, because Makuta is a freaking madman when it comes to his plans. This type of plan is regularly known as the Xanatos Gambit on TV tropes. You probably know it from the Gargoyles TV show if you grew up in, the early 2000s. Basically, it means the villain has accounted for even his losses, so his losses aren't really losses so much as delay. Yeah, that's basically the way it works. So what happened basically is that Matanui's dying. And since he's essentially the universe, I'm trying not to spoil here if you haven't watched the other thing, but if you haven't watched the reference video, you already know what this is about. Basically, the entire universe is going to die. If Matanui dies, everyone goes with him. So they send the Toa Nuva, their champions, who have to defeat Makuta. Not the Toa of Light, he stays behind to guard the city. The guy who beat the one the Toa Nuva could never beat. Yeah, he's going to stay in the city and guard everybody. The Toa Nuva who constantly got their asses kicked by him are the ones who are going to go out there and try and retrieve this powerful relic called the Mask of Life, which has the power to control life itself and should be able to revive Matanui. And it's on this distant island called Voyanui. Get used to these names. The Toa are sent out, and they never return. The situation's growing more desperate. The Matoran are starting to realize what's happening. The universe is starting to die. And a group of Matoran, who had regularly been secondary protagonists, Jaller, Hali, Huki, Nuparu, Matoro, and Kongu, all set out on their own quest to find the Toa Nuva, rescue them, and, do something. They managed to escape Metro Nui, because again, they're supposed to be safe and protected there, under the guard of their last protector, and the Turaga, the elders, are thinking whether or not they should send him out, but if they do, they're completely undefenseless. What happens if he doesn't come back? So, they send them out. So the Turaga basically let them go. A few of them try and stop, but obviously one of the Turagas, the kindly elder who's willing to step aside for the next generation, that's Turaga Vakama. And the Matoran set out. And these are Matoran that if you've only really done a bit of the lore, you probably don't know them that well. You only know really Jaller and Hali from the Mask of Light movie. And even them, not great. But if you really dive into the lore, these are all Matoran who regularly came up. They, led back assaults by the Rahi. They helped defend the villages before the Toa game there. They were involved in lots of the events. Matoro was the advisor to his Turaga and kept Nuju's secrets after he swore himself to silence. These are Matoran who have a history in the franchise. And I genuinely can't express what it meant growing up to see these Matoran taking over for their Toa, going on this quest. They traveled through essentially Matoran hell to get there. So it's this very symbolic quest of growing. And they end up having to escape that place, which is ruled over by this twisted monster called Karzani, through these Toa pods, which are how the Toa travel. And they're not Toa, though, and their bodies might not survive it, but they risk it anyway. And when they arrive on Voyanui's shore, basically magic happens. Look, I'm not going to get into the Red Star, okay? Well, okay, let me explain this. There is a red star that has very special properties that aren't fully revealed for a long, long time. Don't ask, don't question. But there's a lot of Fate and Destiny stuff going on that might also just be computer calculations. Again, we will get there. And it strikes their pods with lightning, which turns them into Toa. Immense amounts of the energy that courses through the Bionicle universe can sometimes turn Matoran into Toa. Think of them as like the evolved version of them, Pokemon-wise. And what happens is they become Toa, yes, but they're Toa born of, like, pure life energy. Their masks are organic and almost alive. All Toa for those you don't know, all Toa have elemental powers drawn from one of the 6 elements, or a tool to channel their power, and a mask that gives them a unique power. So, like, and their masks are all strange and different, not ones they've heard of before. Things like telepathy, finding weak points, flight. Matoran can, like, release his spirit from his body and travel long distances. And they find that their elemental powers, while they are there, they have fire, water, wind, earth, and stone. I know they needed a 6th one, and they wanted one to be brown, one to be black. It's complicated. It's mostly business, but earth and stone. And finally, ice with Matoran, who becomes sort of like one of the central 3 or 4 characters. I would say that Jowler and Matoran get a lot more presence in the story than a lot of the other Toa do. Especially Jowler. I really like what they did with him later on. We'll get there. Anyway, they find out that the island of Oyanui has been taken over by the Prydak. We actually start the series with them. They washed up on the shore in their own Toa containers that they hijacked. They know the Mask of Light is there, and they've been trying to steal it because they're a group of murderers and thieves. The Prydak were basically these villains. We don't talk about the Prydak rep, which was used to advertise their figures. Please don't ever mention that thing in front of me ever again. I've told you it exists. That's all I'm going to do. Oh, God, that was horrible. Oh, God damn. That was... Just thinking about that makes me feel embarrassed for myself as a kid. And I was embarrassed even as a kid by that song. Anyway, the Prydak tricked the Matoran that lived there into thinking they were Toa. But they were also developing this mind control stuff their leader Xantax had. The Prydak all have weird abilities. They can technically use elemental powers like Toa can, but they can only use them when they're used in combination with another. So they can, like, create a molten rock golem if the Earth guy and the Earth and the Fire one work together. But they also have more specific abilities. Specialized heat beams. One of them create prisons telepathically that are perfectly suited to the weaknesses of the people they imprison. Xantax had his form blasted apart, and now he's literally a mass of swarming microscopic shards. Things like that. They're all very interesting. I actually like how the powers of the villains are, despite the fact they are elemental, their elemental powers are like a secondary. It's like, yeah, we have to work together to use those. We hate working together. We're all looking for the best chance to stab each other in the back. Which, again, all great. The Prydak are pretty good villains. I will actually admit that. Although they get surpassed by the next set of villains in this arc, I will admit they're at least interesting. Anyway, the Toa Nuva came there and were defeated, but and mind controlled by the stuff they used to mind control the Matoran, which is the antidermis, which we will get to. It's okay. You know what? It's Makuta. He's alive. He's been alive this whole time, and the antidermis is his actual essence. His armor is just a hollow shell, and when he got killed, his essence managed to escape, and he convinced Xantax because he's low-key mind-controlling without him realizing it. Okay, we covered? We're covered. Alright. So, what begins is a race for the Mask of Light. The Toa and Nika get on the island, find a small group of Matoran resistance that knew about the Toa Nuva and tried to help them. They figure out a cure to the antidermis using energized protodermis, which is basically miracle substance that does whatever the plot needs it to do. Oh, come on, it's a kid's show. It has to have at least one of those. It's a kid's book series. It really is. I love the comics though. They're really fun. Anyway, they free most of the Matoran, but in the meantime, the Prydak have found the tunnel leading to the hidden chamber where the Mask of Life is. Q race down the stairs. There are tons of rooms with different challenges and guardians that have been created by the Mask of Life. They actually get really creative with it too. Some of them are guardians that were placed there a long time ago, but they're also... Oh, actually, I forgot something. Speaking of guardians. Sorry, mid-rant interruption. So there were 2 guardians placed on the surface as well. Anox and Brutaka. Brutaka, though, wants the Mask of Life for himself, so he ends up betraying his partner, Anax. He's a giant guy, he wears an axe. Prydak has his dual sword, he has a mask that lets him teleport. Teams up the Prydak. He's actually the one who ends up finally defeating the Toa Nuva, because they almost managed to beat the Prydak on their own, because they are the Toa Nuva. They've been through some shit. And they will be through a lot more shit before it's all said and done. Anyway, after all of that nonsense, Brutaka, let's just say Brutaka just eventually goes away. I forget what exactly happened to him. Let me look at this real quick. So 2 of the Prydak tried to steal his powers, apparently. Yeah, okay, now I remember. So 2 of the Prydak have been plotting against the others. They stole his powers. The others had to kind of work together. The Prydak and the Matoran resistance had to create a Zamor spear to reverse the effects. And Brutaka was subdued. Axon and him started fighting, but Axon beat him, and then he was taken away by a mysterious figure called Botar. Yes, I know, these are a lot of weird names. I actually really like them about the series. I'm sorry, the names are like half the best part. They're just half the fun for me. It made it feel really exotic and weird. The whole world just felt so alien. And I really love Boyanui as an island. It's sort of an inverse of the original island. So the first series, Chronicles, took place on the island of Matanui, which is basically this island paradise, like a tropical paradise, where, yeah, there are all these monsters and Makuta and stuff, but it can be really peaceful and beautiful. Boyanui is like the exact opposite. It's a rocky, desolate hunk. Like, if you thought the Mask of Life was anywhere, it would probably be on Matanui, not this like, horrible rock. And it really does come across as a place that's just miserable to live on. All the Matoran hate living here, but they can't really go anywhere. They're not Toa, and even if they were, they don't have a lot of ways of getting off the island. It's actually very interesting. I just like the contrast. Anyway, the Toa and Nika find out their powers are now laced with lightning. They, get to the race, and we're back to where I was. So both the Prydak and the Toa and Nika recovered from the whole Brutaka incident, and they're now all racing down the stairs to try and get to the Mask of Life first. They beat a lot of trials. There's a lot of fun stuff here. Like, there are these small little things called prototypes that are basically like microscopic organisms. The Mask of Life created guardians by, like, blowing them up to the size of, like, giant wolves. And it's like, oh, that's cool. So it's like mutating life around it to create guardians. And we later find out that anyone who touches the mask that doesn't deem worthy, is basically turned into a servant. So one of the Prydak is called Vezok. And a long time ago, he got hit with this spear that split him in half. And his other half, Vezon, got all the brains. So he betrayed the others and stole the location long before they could get there. And he found the mask. But when he touched it, it fused to his head, bound a spider, which drew to massive size to him. And now he technically has the mask, but he has none of its powers, can't use it, so he can't use it, and he's trapped in this room forever guarding it. Which is just a really ironic and beautiful punishment. Also, Vezon is a fun character, but he's also the main author's favorite character, Greg Farshi. He's on record saying Vezon is his favorite, and Vezon was fine, okay? Look, Vezon gets to some hate. I liked Vezon when I first read him. He didn't need to keep coming back after the Ignition arc, Greg Farshi. He really didn't need to keep surviving things. Because he got old. Okay, personal rant over. Sorry, I keep going off track, but there's just so much in this arc. It's this is like, for those of you who want to know, I'm going to be putting a link to where you can get all the Ignition stuff. This is across comics, a book series, and even some online web stuff. And there is a beautiful archive we'll also be linking to. It's in the same description as the Bionicle reference video. It's called Bio Sector. They have all this stuff. Bionicle archives have everything. You can just go check this stuff out for free. Like, why wouldn't you? It's all there. It's all for free. Our community has literally collected all the lore and all the stories in an archive where you can just enjoy them for free. Games, books, comics. Go wild. So I do highly recommend checking this out. There's a lot of stuff, but none of it's quite that long. So yeah, I think it's worth checking out. It's fun and interesting, and the ideas behind it are fun, very unique. For such formulaic storytelling Bionicle often had, it always makes sure to really grab you with interesting world design. And Voyanui is just the start. We're getting to like one of the best parts of Bionicle right now. So, after they beat Vezon and Finrek, the giant spider, the Mask of Life is about to be claimed by Matoro, who's been being called to it this whole time, because he's like the one the Mask of Life has chosen as its wearer. And before he can touch it, though, it bolts out of the cave and flies into the sea. And we get to the best part of Bionicle. Look, I love Time Trap. It's an amazing book. But it's an isolated incident for Bionicle for the most part. But the Mara Nui arc is freaking gold. This is where all the weird subversive stuff Bionicle have been doing for years finally coalesced into something really unique. So, a little context. I'll set the scene for you. So, we break away from the Toa and Ignika as the Mask of Light falls into the sea below. And as it drifts down, you see this massive underwater city coated in air bubbles. A Matoran swims out into the sea and finds it. The strange mask. But something lurks in the depths, in the dark of the sea. He is not alone. And that's just like, there's this tinge of horror to the Mara Nui arc that I really need to instill in you. This dark, empty chasm. Seriously, there are some videos I'm going to link about it in the description. Make sure you watch them because they really sell this creepy vibe this arc had, and I loved it. I love this arc so much. It's part of the reason I'm talking about this, honestly. Don't get me wrong, the Void Nui stuff is fun, but it's still very formulated by Bionicle standards. This place throws everything about Bionicle on its head. So, I'm going to give you some context that we get kind of scattered throughout this story. Essentially, the Toa and Ignika are going to go down there to this underwater city. Now, this place is called the Pit. It's where Botar took Brutaka, actually. The Pit is a creation of the Order of Matanui in a sense. We're not really sure exactly what that means. And it's very complicated based on later stuff we learn about the nature of the universe itself. But essentially, it is a mutagenic sea that Botar can teleport to and leave before he's affected by the water. It mutates anyone who goes into the sea that they're forced to breathe water. Now, for those of you who don't know, in Bionicle, the sea isn't water inside the Bionicle universe. On Matanui it is, but not in the Bionicle universe. In the Bionicle universe, there is only liquid protodermis. What this essentially means is anyone who goes into the pit is biologically incapable of returning to their universe. Unless you're like Botar and can teleport out before the waters affect you, and Brutaka's teleportation is a lot slower than that, because he has to open portals and physically walk through them, the waters mutate you and force you to breathe water. So you can't go back to the Bionicle universe. It's basically a prison for the worst of the worst. And I mean the worst of the worst. Like, the Dark Hunters, they're child's play to the things that lurk in the pit. And it is a sea of mutagenic water full of monsters and horrid criminals now mutating into horrific forms. And the Toa are going down here completely unprepared. In addition, though, when Void Nui got to its position, there's a lot there I'm not going to go into. Essentially, a piece of it broke off a long time ago. The Matoran of Void Nui actually built a city. But then during the fall of Matanui, when Makuta imprisoned him, there was a massive earthquake, and Mara Nui, the big city, sunk underneath the waves. Now, most of the Matoran who survived, a small population of them, believed that everyone just died. They didn't. Some of them did, but not all of them. See, there's this small weed-like substance down there called airweed, and when it's damaged, it releases oxygen. Mara Nui just so happened to fall on a massive patch of this stuff. So when it fell and hit the water, before the water could mutate them, giant bubbles erupted that sort of created a Atlantis effect on the city. However, they need to constantly farm this airweed in order to get out of the city because they have to use small amounts of the air. Basically, air is the most valuable resource down there. They have to farm it using airweed. They have these specially designed creatures called, what are they called again? Let's see. Hydruka. They were called Hydruka. So they use them to farm the airweed, basically. And essentially, the village managed to survive. They managed to came out essentially in equilibrium. But they don't travel that far because, limited oxygen, your air bubble will eventually shrink and run out, and then you'll either die or you'll become something else. Yeah, essentially like that. Not great. And, it's connected by a stone core, which the Toa are using to travel down, but meanwhile, the Mask of Life has fallen. And it's gotten the attention of some big fish in the water. So a long, long time ago, and when I say that I mean like 10,000 years ago or something, Bionicle works in some absurd timescales, okay? Basically every character is functionally biologically immortal because they're half cyborg creatures, but that's, again, story for another day, but, basically, these group of very powerful warlords who had conquered most of the known Bionicle universe tried to usurp Matanui. Essentially, they tried to take over the capital of the entire universe, Metronui, and declare themselves the new gods. Screw Matanui, all that nonsense. And I bet you're thinking, hey, it sounds a lot like Makuta's plan. You're right, because it was their plan first. So Makuta came forward with the army of basically the rest of the known universe and defeated them. These warlords were then captured. However, before they could be taken as prisoners, a strange being, Botar, the same guy who took Brutaka, who works for the Order of Matanui, served Matanui directly, mysteriously came in, said he was higher than Makuta, who again is basically, at this point, he's not evil. He's leader of Brotherhood Makuta. They originally created Rahi for the benefit of Matoran. They were basically like genetic engineers who controlled way more power, and they were basically like the superiors to the Toa. In fact, back then, Toa, the heroes, the day-to-day people who fought off monsters and saved them from cataclysms and helped Matoran do their jobs, the day-to-day heroes, they were seen like upper management. They even had entire Toa squads that would guard them to protect them with their life against thieves and criminals who sought to destabilize the universe. Makuta used to be a good guy. Makuta Prydak specifically. And he got kind of angry when Botar took them. And over the years, as he grew more and more dissatisfied, he thought about the Baraki. They were his inspiration for his plan. Could you usurp Matanui? Could a god truly have his domain, his universe taken from him? So essentially, you can blame these guys for basically everything that happens in this series. Remember, all of this originated from Makuta putting Matanui to sleep. It's the inciting incident for basically the entire series. That decision, that plan. And these a-holes are responsible. Maybe Makuta would have always gone a bit mad, but these guys gave him inspiration. And they are, like, nightmarish. Well, essentially. Like, they're not as scary as they used to be, but they were pretty terrifying to me as a kid. At least on some level. They're all, like, mutated fish people. One guy, their leader-ish, is this ruthless guy who rules over a group of sharks. Basically, they are still warlords, but they don't really have any sentient beings down there, because not many survived the cataclysm. It's a long story. They have a handful of more intelligent minions, but mostly they just rule over the sea life. Essentially, they assert themselves as the alphas of an entire species. So like we do when we're introducing any of the many Bionicle groups, we've got to talk about the individuals. So, let's go through the roll call. So, first we got Elec. He ruled over an army of venomous eels, and he actually built a fortress for the Baraki when they first came to this place after they were freed from their prison cells by the Cataclysm. But it was actually smashed to ruins by the Maranui falling on top of it. So he actually got really pissed and has been picking off Matoran whenever he gets a chance and waiting to amass his armies to destroy them outright because he really, really hates them. Also an interesting note, he was one of the most outcasts of the Baraki's original group because he was actually a native water breather from a species that breathes liquid protodermis. So he was actually mutated the least by the pit's waters and feels the most at home in the pit. He was able to adapt to it the most quickly. That's why he was, again, the one who built the fortress because, underwater fortress, been there, done that. So, next up, we have Prydak. He's the pseudo-leader-ish. He's definitely the most ruthless of the group. He's the ice stand-in, ish. Like, he's not, he's not officially, because there's no elemental setting with this group, but yeah. Anyway, he's most powerful, physically speaking. He's basically been turned into a shark person, and rules over the, group of shark Rahi down in the pit. Then we have Kalma. He has ruled over what are they called? The squid. They're basically these small squid-like things that served as the specialized projectiles. You pulled them back on this little slingshot launcher for the figures. They're probably the least interesting thing, conceptually, mechanical-wise, from the sets. It was the only thing that dragged the set down, actually. And they fed on, Creature's life. They're one of the main weapons for the Baraki, so has a bit of power in that regard. He makes essentially their ammo. After that, we have Karupar? Karupar, I think is how you pronounce that. Karupar. He's basically a rootless, dumb brute. He usually works with Kalma. And then you have Takadaks. He is probably the most well-known of the Baraki. If you've done any other Bionicle stuff, he turns up later on a few more times. He has hypnotic powers, and he basically is like this super manipulative guy. He had the power to do it. He had the power to hypnotize people beforehand, but it was enhanced by the mutagenic powers of the pit. He commanded an army of underwater insects. And finally, we have Mantax. He was the most mysterious of the group, the Earth stand-in. He was basically he basically turned into a living manta ray. And he's very patient and cunning. He usually would wait on the seafloor, waiting for prey to pass, when he wanted to eat. Very patient, always looking for the evidence that he believed there was a traitor amongst the Baraki that had gotten them in trouble after all these years. So, you have a bunch of powerful warlords, still bitter about their fall 10,000 years ago, who are also still bitter about all the Matoran, who dropped on their freaking fortress, and are just waiting for an opportunity to tear them apart. Oh, and there might be a traitor in their midst, and the Mask of Life, the thing that controls and mutates life, might be able to undo the mutations that make them unable to return and reclaim their kingdoms. Yeah, that thing has just been dropped into this really volatile situation. Oh, and these guys don't like sharing. So yeah, as you can imagine, shit's about to get real. And the Toamari have no idea what they're getting into, because no one knew this place was a pit. No one, because it's a secret prison for the most secretive organization in the Bionicle universe. Of course no one knows this place exists. It's literally just all these volatile factions suddenly being dropped on each other. With the Matoran village in the middle, all these people who are assumed dead by everyone on the surface. So yes, shit goes down. The Toa are oftentimes outnumbered, outgunned, stranded in a strange ocean with monsters beyond your imagination. Sorry, I just love that trailer so much. Fun fact, if you didn't know, Bionicle makes some of the best trailer videos ever. Like, these things are full-on, music videos, and they are great. Seriously, you can find this stuff online. Just, look up a few of these things. I might put some in the description if I remember correctly, but, I'll see. Just go, look up Bionicle trailers. They're all so much fun, especially as they got older. The first few are kind of just boring, look, some cinematic with some CG stuff. But they got real fun as they went on. Got full-on music videos. Move Along was my jam when I was growing up. And Cryoshell, they're a band that does a few songs I like, because that's how I am. I don't really attach myself to being one band. But I like a lot of Cryoshell stuff, and they got their start with Bionicle. So, great music. Thank you, Bionicle. The very minimum for that. And some fun stuff here. Anyway. The Baraki form a sort of uneasy alliance, but it's just like the Paraka, it's very clear they're all about to betray each other. I'm not going to go over everything that happens here, because otherwise we would be here for a while. There's a lot of betrayal, subterfuge. Makuta gets involved by arresting a robot guard. The Mask of Life mutates a Matoran into the version with into a body that's the exact replica of, with all the memories of, a dead prison guard that used to rule over this place. Yes, all of this happens in 5 books and in 5 comics, okay? Stuff gets crazy fast. There are so many storylines going on top of each other. I cannot accurately describe it all. I love this arc for its complexity. All the characters are off on their own a lot, doing other things. They interesting pairings. But I'm going to run through some of the things I like. I love the vibe. The dark, mysterious underwater of the pit is a really different environment that we hadn't seen a lot. And one of the reasons I kind of like Greg Farshtey is that he really understands how you write stuff like this. So the pit isn't just a change in atmosphere. It's also a change in power dynamics. See, in most Toa teams, especially the main ones we follow in the story, the Toa of Fire is always the leader. He's the guy who gets the weird visions, the guy who has the most mysterious mentor, who's always guiding the Toa just in the way they need to. You know, their mentor is the leader, they're the de facto leader, they, you know, argue about it with their Lancer. There's, you know, getting visions, they're leading the team, and that was true for the first part of this series. That's why I say the first part is a bit more conventional, even if it starts breaking those conventions. Jaller becomes the Toa of Fire. Fire laced with lightning. He is literally the raw powerhouse of their team, you know? He's the Toa of Fire, the leader, the burning bright light. And now, the Toa of Fire is stuck underwater. And they actually have that mean something. His powers are weaker down here. He doesn't really control fire so much as heat. Trying to manifest even a flame for a few seconds is essentially impossible. Meanwhile, Holly, who's, you know, the Toa of water, is completely in her element. Her control over water and her natural inclination towards swimming gives her the most mobility. She's able to jet around the environment, duking out with the Baraki hand to hand with a massive claw. Meanwhile, Jaller has to get inventive, has to use his heat-based abilities. You know, overheating people or burning them inside where it's not as wet. And they really make this mean something, too. I have to admit, I'm very impressed with the way Greg Farshtey always made to make the elemental powers more interesting than you would initially assume. Then again, this is like his third arc, so I guess you gotta mix it up eventually. They also have things like Hongu, the Toa of Air, just goes for dual blasters because they had these explosive launchers, essentially. They're bazookas. They're essentially bazookas. The Toa each got. He just grabbed two of them because his powers are also extremely weak down here. Because, yeah, he can form a massive air spear, maybe, but it's not going to have the same effect as it, you know, would on land. Controlling air is more like controlling bubbles than it is controlling water. So while Holly is literally surrounded by an element she has complete control over, like, she's really powerful in this setting, two of her teammates have been severely downgraded as a result. Matoro is also kind of in his element. The other two, you know, they don't like to swim around a lot because they gotta be near their rocks and earth in order to use their powers, but they're pretty fine as it is. Their masks get changed out for this one because they always like to change that stuff out, so there's all stuff like that. And I really enjoy it. Like, I gotta say this, I really enjoy this. It's an interesting, fun twist. You got this cool horror environment. You got the Matoran not fully trusting the Toa again, but this time it's a lot more justified because they kind of look like monsters now. They're mutated. They have like gills, and it's Holly has like these bone wing things. It's like, yeah, these guys don't really look like Toa anymore. And it was really the place where Bionicle just hit its stride. It showed off the creativity of the team that works on this stuff. And I've got to give them a lot of props for this whole thing. I know it was basically a way to sell Legos, but it meant a lot to me as a child, and this was kind of the point where I was the most invested in the whole series. This was my jam. I have to tell you guys that. Like, I had been into Bionicle since I was like 5 years old. One of the first books I remember owning, was the Red Chronicles collection book. It's a hardcover. I actually still own it. It's on my bookshelf. I might post a picture to that, because that book has been with me since I was like, wow, a long time. I genuinely don't know. Sometime between the ages of like 5 and 7, is when I first had it. And I've had it for all this time. But like, this was the series that just got me immediately invested. I was begging my parents to take me to Barnes & Noble every time the new book came out, because I had to know what happened. I got the Lego magazines coming in with the Bionicle comics, and every time a comic came in from them, I was so excited. And this series meant a lot to me. The underwater battle hits its peak. Matoro is eventually manipulated by Makuta to sacrifice his life, because the Mask of Life turns out has a price. The user has to give up their own life to give life to something else. It can't just create life from nothing. It gives life from other sources. Using its own energy takes time. And one of the cool things about the Mask of Life is that, yeah, you have an object so powerful it brings everything around it to life. that includes itself. It's alive, thinking. In the middle of this conflict, it has opinions on how it should be used. And it deems Matoro as worthy. Matoro, who kept the secrets of Metru Nui all these years from the others, who has always been kind of off to the side and ostracized. Like, never on purpose. The others always try to be supportive of him. But Matoro's always felt different. And he could refuse, you know? He could say, no, I don't want to give my life. We could just live here. You're technically outside the Great Robot now, so they're not inside the Matoran universe at the moment, which means they could theoretically survive this. But he makes the ultimate sacrifice, and the others do too. Like, this is not a story where the Toa come across as really victorious in the end. It's kind of their tragedy. The final battle involves them having to reseal the hole in the universe where Maranui and Boinui pop down to the ocean that holds Motunui. Long story, Bionicle geography is a little weird like that. Anyway, essentially, they have to sink the island again, and they have to evacuate all Matoran, get ready, but while they're doing this, they're outgunned. The Prydak have re-established their armies, and they're rushing down to beat them, to get the mask, to reclaim their power and their place in the universe. And the Toa realize they're not going to make it. If they have to keep fighting, they won't make it. So, bit by bit, they break off together to give Matoro time and energy to rush down there with the mask, to reach the core of their universe, so he can make the sacrifice he needs to. And this really is played out like a sacrifice for them. They hold the Pryda's army at bay. Matoro reaches the hole in the universe, and he gives in. He gives in to the mask. What it's been calling him to do, to use it for its purpose, for a worthy wielder to truly use it. And Matoro, finally, after all these years, gives his life for everything. And you see this final moment where he has essentially the power of a god. Like, literally, at the cost of his life, he could essentially do whatever he wanted. He could remake himself anew, as powerful as Motunui if he wanted to, if he truly wanted to. He could do anything. And he chooses to save Motunui, to give life to this universe, to save all those he cares about. And it was Matoro's sacrifice that forever shaped the series going onward. And as he's dying, he has a bit of his spark left. A single bit. He's holding on by a thread. And he sees through the mask his friends. The friends he's been with for so long, they don't even know all the memories they share together because of Makuta's mind wipe stuff. Millennia upon millennia. He sees them outnumbered, surrounded by the Pryda's armies, being torn to shreds. He sees Jalar, the Toa of Fire, the one who led them on this accursed journey, standing tall, telling them that they have to hold out, and that in order to prevent them from reaching Matoro, he's going to do something horrific. See, the Toa of Fire can go, essentially, have an ability which is called going supernova, which they essentially do. They turn themselves into a star, heavily unstable, and explode out with their firepower. It's essentially a suicide bomb attack that kills everything around them. It's only been hinted at a few times. Toa of Fire, do not do this recklessly. He knows it will kill everyone. He might not even survive. But he realizes that they can't risk anyone interfering with what Matoro's doing. But Matoro, realizing that he has a chance to stop them from dying, at the very least he can protect his friends, instead of using the power for anything else, he uses it to send them home. He's dying. He's already used up most of his life at this point. The mask is just letting him have a bit more power because it respects his decisions, and he uses that power to send his friends home. He gives them the ability to breathe air and sends them on their way. With a wave of his hand, the Toa Mari have come home. Jalar has to be talked down for using the supernova, has to bring the power back in before it explodes out and destroys the city. And then they realize, they feel it. They're inside the universe again. They're in Matunui's embrace, and they feel the Great Spirit lives again. And they look around, and they realize that Matoro's gone. He's dead. That he gave his life for everything. And I know I'm over-dramatizing this, but it was a really big deal when this happened. Towa didn't die. Like, the only Towa that had died in the show up to this point had been a few off-screen unnamed Towa, a really evil Towa who had apparently died in the cataclysm of the prison. We find out there's this whole subplot about him searching for this Makuta, trying to figure out what happened to this legendary weapon in this weird clone situation. It's complicated. Alternate realities get involved. There's a lot here. And Matoran died. He had been with the series from the beginning. He was one of the original 6 Matoran, and he was dead. Like, the only other Towa who had died that had a decent on-screen presence was Lacan, and he died he appeared in, like, a little bit in the first book, was talked about a lot, and he was supposed to be, like, the mentor to kick the Towa Matru into doing what they need to do. But that was, like, the mentor of the prequel about the mentors. Like, of course he's not still going to be around. Matoran was one of the main characters of the entire franchise. And you just kill them off recklessly. So it was a big deal when they decided to do this. And I will say, it's one of the parts of this entire franchise that has really stuck with me, even after all these years, is, especially the comic version, with Matoran's body being, like, torn apart by the mask. It's always just stuck with me. It's just well made, well done. His entire arc about feeling like an outsider, knowing that Makuta's using him, everything. It's just really well done. I like it. I'm sorry, I just really like it. Anyway, that's me getting emotional about something I got into when I was 5. Yeah. The series just means a lot to me. I'm going to kind of roll through the next part. The next part's just not as interesting to me. So basically, you're in the core of the universe. There are the Matoran of Light, who I think Takanuva also is related to. There's also a lot of side stories going on with him. Oh my gosh, there's so many, like, side stories of Bionicle. Like, the world is just so fleshed out. I love it. Anyway, the Towa Nuva have, after a very long journey, gotten this adaptive armor and are fighting a battle in the skies with the Matoran of Light, who have been attacked by the Makuta. They have these leeches that turn the Matoran into, like, evil, dark Matoran. And the last holdouts of the Village of Light, in the core of the universe, Kardanui, are witness to the flash of light, the Matoro. They do something interesting here. So there are other members of the Brotherhood of Makuta, other Makuta here. Now, 3 of them went into the swamp to secure Makuta Pterodax's plan. And the other 3 are doing their part near the village of Kardanui. And they're blinded by the flash of Matoro's light. When the Mask of Life goes off in, like, a nuclear explosion. The Matoran aren't, but the Makuta are. They're blinded by it. So they have to use their Dark Matoran helpers in order to see through a mental connection, and they basically ride them around. It was actually a really cool idea. So basically you had each Towa had a separate Matoran figure, and they were always attached to them either as partners in the sky with, like, rocket jets, or the winged Dark Matoran acting as the eyes for their Makuta masters. The light leeches were a really cool concept, all involved. Anyway, things go off there. They start beating back the Makuta, because, they're the Towa Nuva, and fighting Makuta is what they do. They find out this might be where they came from before they were put into those pods. That they had a whole life here before they forgot. That this is their purpose. They're finally going to fully awaken Matanui. He was already starting to awaken by the stuff they did earlier. He was mentally there, but physically, they were going to physically bring him back to his peak. And as a result, they voyage into the Cortex. They find everything they need. They go through, like, a scavenger hunt in the swamps, which is, it's alright. If you can't tell, I liked the first part with with Kopaka, Pohatu, and Lua in the sky fighting the Makuta. That was cool. It was an interesting twist. I liked that we saw new Makuta, because we'd only known, like, 1 or 2 of them in the entire series up to that point. But all in all, it was just okay. The others in the swamp are considered one of the low points of this entire saga. I'm not going to dwell on it too much. They're kind of mutated by the water that's been seeping into the core into a more insectoid form. There's only really one interesting guy, from my opinion. It's mostly interesting his powers. See, he's Makuta. He has a lot of powers, but he has a mask like most people, most powerful beings. And his mask is basically the ability to drag versions of himself from the past. So The way it works, and it's a really cool concept. I actually think it's one of the better powers that have been introduced into the universe, because it's both a power and a curse to an extent. He can essentially grab a version of himself from any point in his past. However, when that version is sent back, they retain all injuries and forget everything that happened. So, and those injuries don't disappear. They're sent back into the past. He actually regularly finds himself with, and if they're killed, he dies. Like, he ceases to be, like, Marty McFly's himself. So it's a very dangerous power, but as you can imagine, being able to turn a powerful being like Makuta who can fire energy blast and has literally over 100 powers, like creating vacuums, mind control, like, the Makuta can do some ridiculous stuff, and one of them alone is already a big threat, even one of the weaker ones. And his ability to literally summon multiple copies of himself from the past, and Makutas don't really age that much past a certain point, so for most of his lifespan that he can grab versions of himself from, he can just fire off copies of himself at full strength. Again, the problem is, if he gets injured, that injury affects him in the past, so he has to be very careful, because if they get too damaged, his own timeline can get a bit funky. You know, cascading consequences. Also, since he exists in a point in another version of his past, he suddenly will find himself with just injuries out of nowhere. It's like, oh, I guess some a-hole from the future decided to rip me out of the middle of this battle, and now I have a freaking scar. Great, I can't use this arm anymore. Like, there's interesting stuff you can do with it. They do a few interesting things with it. I like it. It's fun. They have another one whose mask lets him go intangible, but they make his powers go out of control, and he just, like, fades into nothingness, because the way it works is his molecules drift further apart while still maintaining his consciousness, and it goes into overdrive, so his molecules shoot, like, you know, miles apart, and he's still alive, but probably wishes he wasn't. And I like that there's Krika. So Krika is the only other Makuta I would say is interesting via personality. So a long time ago, when Makuta Pterodax decided the Brotherhood Makuta was going to take over the universe, he went to his other fellow Makuta and was like, yeah, we're going to do this. He was the most powerful of them, by the way. And as you can imagine, since they were protectors of the universe, some of them didn't agree with him. They're not around anymore. They're all dead. And Krika was kind of one of those on the sidelines. He ended up siding with Pterodax, but really only because he knew that he'd die and he didn't. And he isn't really much for domination's sake, in that more of, I kind of agree with what he's saying. The universe could use a bit more order, but I'm mostly here because I don't want to freaking die. And he has an actual respect for his opponents. A lot of Makuta are almost the most powerful beings in the universe to a certain extent, aside from Motunui. That's why they were able to take over so easily. They're energy beings. They don't tire physically. They're basically just a goop inside an armor. They can use their powers without having to move. They just have to think, and instantly you're surrounded by a vacuum or fried by electricity, you know? At their best, the Makuta are essentially minor gods. And unlike all the other beings, they've evolved to a higher state of being. So, essentially, a lot of them find themselves as, like, more powerful. They regularly lose because of that whole thing where the villain's like, I'm too powerful. Like, what are you going to do to me, insect? It's the same thing that gave Vakama the ability to have the upper hand. Makuta was playing all these games with them, and he underestimated just how far Vakama was willing to go until he put in the mask, and he realized, oh shit, I backed myself into a corner. And that's basically responsible for most of Makuta's delays, though his plans have always accounted for failures, so. Krika isn't like the others, though. He has a genuine respect for other beings in the universe. He admits that many Makuta have died in the past, and many died during their rebellion because they were unwilling to admit that the Toa were actual threats. Of course, all Makuta fear a Toa of Light, because light can destroy their shadow powers and can even burn them from within, so obviously that kind of Toa is dangerous, but a Toa of Fire? What's a Toa of Fire gonna do to me? Right until he fills the inside of your armor with flame and you burn from the inside out, just like a Toa of Light would do. You know? Just because they are easier to deal with doesn't mean they're not still threats. And, like I said, he's not really as evil as the others, so he feels a sort of kinship with them almost. He's like, Toa, I could debate philosophy with you, but unfortunately we have a job to do. But you are a worthy opponent. All Toa are, when they're trained right. So I guess I'll give you a bit of time. He approaches them like equals. Which I know is weird, but like this is, for context, the Makuta we've mostly dealt with is the leader of the Makuta, the most powerful one of them, who wields the Mask of Shadows to amplify his own abilities. And he's been a manipulative a-hole who genuinely thinks that all other creatures are lesser beings that should grovel at his feet. How dare you even pretend to oppose me? You know, and the other Makuta have mostly done that same song and dance. Krika was a very interesting take on like, oh, so this is what the Makuta were like. This is what they were like beforehand. They saw themselves as more powerful, yes, but they saw that also as kind of their responsibility. Yes, we are powerful, and that makes us the perfect peacekeepers. The Toa will handle the small problems. We handle the larger scale. We watch over the universe itself. We are Matanui's brothers. We guard him. You know, like, you sort of got a hint of who the Makuta used to be, and added a lot more texture to their betrayal. That, combined with the Baraki inspiring and twisting Makuta Pterodax's original ambitions, it gave the Makuta a texture, and that's something I really wasn't expecting going into this as a kid. Again, all of this, just really cool. Krika even ends up, because Krika isn't as blindly devoted to Makuta Pterodax's plan, he ends up figuring out what's going on. Because see, when Matanui's heart gets restarted, it's kind of gonna go completely nuclear and fry every living being inside of it. Yeah. Makuta Pterodax sent what's left of his forces to guard the heart and didn't tell them about that part. Because why would he tolerate threats to his domination? Because Makuta Pterodax is a villain's villain. Yeah. It's not enough that he becomes God. He has to really rub it in by killing anyone who has even a slightest chance of opposing him, because he doesn't take chances. I mean, even the chances he took were eventually revealed to just be setbacks, not actual defeats. So, yeah, he really doesn't. The Toa activated. All the Makuta get fried. Krika tries to warn the others, but one of the other Makuta thinks he's betrayed them and ends up killing him, and then she realizes, oh shit, he was right. Crud, he betrayed us, Pterodax, why? Why would you betray me, great leader? Which, again, really great stuff. I don't have time to talk about it all. We're almost at an hour. God, it's almost been an hour. I've been talking about this so long. There's a lot to talk about, though. Like I said, there's six comics. There's what? This whole Ignition cycle is actually a lot more than 6 comics. It's 15 comics, 12 books? I don't know, 10 books. 10 books. And a bunch of side stories online. So there's a lot to get into. There's really a lot to dig into in Bionicle, which is one of the reasons, again, why I just love it. And, the ending is ending. All the Toa Nuva return home, victorious. Takanuva has returned from his whole quest when he went down there to help them. The Toa Mari helped helped save Matanui from death, and the Toa Nuva came home and they brought him back. Matanui is revived. And then the final scene is just submits the Ignition as a tragedy. It always was. This is all a joke. Because as they celebrate, they hear a dark laughter. Foolish Toa. You thought you were finished with me? Makuta! Come out! Face us, coward! How could I possibly? Could you face your own cells within your body? And the stars above, which had always been a vision, a way for Matanui to communicate with the Matoran, shift and change until they're staring at a replica of the Mask of Shadows made of stars. And they realize Matanui is gone. His presence fired out of the body. The robot that was this whole universe, the reveal that a lot of people already saw coming, and has been launched into space. Makuta is now in control, and we're all frickin' doomed. What will happen next time? Will Matanui return to his body? Will Makuta be defeated? Find out later in the version. It's alright. I'm not a huge fan of the Bar manga arc, so I'm probably not going to talk about it much. But yeah, that was how this ended. The villain basically became God. And yeah, that is as terrifying as you can imagine it because of all the things Makuta's done over the years. And it was just one of the most shocking heel turn, what the actual heck moments in Bionicle fandom. We finally got that reveal that everything had been hinting toward for a while. The Bionicle universe was a giant robot. Makuta's plan was to literally become Matanui. Matanui's been fired out of the universe. The Mask of Life is gone. So again, one of the only threats to his power and his adversary both fired out together. Which does come bite him in the ass because Makuta is famously bad at determining when that happens. So yeah, that's the way it worked. That's basically it. That's Ignition. I'm glad you all sat through this. Anyone who sat through this, seriously, I appreciate you a lot. If my dad's listening to this, because I know my dad does chime in on these, thank you for listening to this whole thing, Dad. Really appreciate it. Everyone else who's listening, I appreciate anyone who's been willing to listen to me rant about Bionicle for this long. Couldn't do it without you guys. But yeah, this, as you can tell, this particular series of Bionicle really meant a lot to me as a kid. It was the one that came out around the time I was in middle school, when I was like at the peak of Bionicle fever before I started getting into other stuff. So it's one of my absolute favorite parts of the whole series. It's a high point of my entire childhood, honestly. And one of those like pieces of childhood I don't get to share with a lot of people, because I know one or two people who like Bionicle, but they remember it for like the figurines. I don't actually have any friends who like Bionicle for its lore. So getting to talk about it online means a lot. Thank you guys so much for listening. Next time, I'm very much hoping that I will have finished The Wheel of Time, Book 1, and I will be able to, review that and then review the TV show maybe a week later. Then the new Spider-Man movie should be coming around that time too. So we got tons of stuff to review. I'm also going to be reviewing another thing from my childhood, because I really like reviewing obscure stuff. So I'm going to be reviewing Merlin's Dragon sometimes in the future. You can look out for that. It's a book by T.A. Barron, if you're looking for it. It's part of this Merlin's fantasy series that he wrote a while back. I actually really enjoyed it as a kid. My mom got me to read it. Thank you, Mom, for that. I know you got me into reading. She's the reason I'm doing all this. So I'll probably give a little shout out to her during that review. Look forward to that in the future, guys. If you're wondering, the YouTube channel is now fully operational. I will have a link to this video. I'll put a little advertisement on my Twitter. Hey, go, check out, this is where the channel is. It's called The Dragon's Library on YouTube. You can find it. Got a new banner for it. Did all this drawing. I'm working on some other icons and stuff. Really trying to draw some more stuff so I can have some more art assets to work with. I've only started getting into drawing recently thanks to a friend. Thank you, Frederick. Anyway, this has been a fun little rant by me. Signing out. See you guys next time.
I hope you enjoyed listening to this episode, and thank you for listening to The Dragon's Library. Please subscribe to this podcast to be notified of new episodes. The Dragon's Library releases new episodes Tuesday and Friday each week, and you can follow us on Twitter at dragon_library2. If you want to suggest an episode topic, my email is in the description below. And as always, thank you so much for all your support.